All right. Let me go back to the beginning. This is part one of a two-part study. What I want to be talking to you about is the 1260 days that is leading up to the second coming. This is something I've known about for a long time. I've never spoke on it though. But I had someone ask me in a private message in a chat box on Facebook about this 3.5 years. 1260 days is 3.5 years, which is 42 months, which is also put like this: a time times and a half a time. And how we get that is time is 1, times is 2, and a half a time makes 3.5. And so this is a real sneaky way of saying 3.5. And what we're looking at is that the Bible prophets, specifically Daniel and John, both talked about this 1260 day period, or this 42 month or 3.5 year period. They both talked about this period leading up to the coming of the Lord. And so how do we know this is the same time period? It's because they all lead up to the second coming. There's not one of these prophets that do not talk about this 1260 days or this 42 months or this 3.5 years that does not mention the coming of the Lord after they have mentioned this time frame. So we know this is the 1260 days or 1260 years leading up to, 1260 days leading up to the second coming of the Lord. That's what we know, and this is how we know it. This is all the same. And so people have not been able to recognize this as the same, but what we'll be doing today is showing you texts that will actually use this interchangeably. We'll see that where he'll call it one, he might call it 1260 days, and then later in the text he'll call it 42 months, or he might call it 3.5, or he might call it time times and half time. He'll show you that that's the same thing by substituting words, see, is what we're saying. So as we get into this, I want to first of all take you through Daniel's vision. This is from Daniel chapter 7, in verse 15 through 28. We want to look at Daniel's vision of the last days before the second coming. And we're just going to be pointing out the time frames and where he says that Jesus is coming at the end of that time frame. Okay? So he says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. And so we know that from studying visions recently that sometimes the Lord gives someone a vision and they have no idea what it means. And so they need to be led to understand it. It happened to Peter that way when he saw the sheet let down from heaven. He said that he thought about what that meant and didn't know. And somebody knocked on the door, see? And it was about that knock that was coming. And so the visions of his head troubled him. And he said, I came near unto them. That's one of them, that would be one of the angels in the vision, and he that stood by, and he asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of things. And so there were 4 great beasts that he saw in the vision. These great beasts, which are 4 kings. Now listen, what's important about this is that the prophets actually tell which kings these were. Okay? And the three of those kings that were forecast to come actually happened before Jesus came the first time. Okay? And the 4th kingdom was Rome. But what we see is that kingdom doesn't go away. It just changes forms until the end of time. So that 4th kingdom is something that exists from probably Jesus' day up till the very end time, where there's a renewal of that beast of Rome. There's a renewal of it, and even becomes a persecuting force against Christianity. And so he's saying that these great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall rise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. And so this is the millennium time, the end result of this. He's letting you know that this 4th beast is going to be a problem, but he's letting you know what's going to happen, how it all ends. The way it ends is the saints of the Most High are going to possess the kingdom. They're going to take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever. And so they're going to win in the end. The saints are going to win in the end. This is the end result, say, of this warfare that's coming between the 4th beast and the saints of God. And he said, I would know the truth of the 4th beast. And that's what we're trying to study, is this fourth one, because he's the issue for the last days. Okay? And so he says, I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. So this is a kingdom that's really destroying or consuming whatever's before it. It's also very powerful in that it's exercising its own will, and that there's no one able to prevent it from exercising its will. And then he talks of the 10 horns that were upon his head. Now this is important, because see, whenever the Revelation talks about the beast as it pertains to the fourth beast, it starts looking different over time. It starts off kind of one way, but the 10-horn beast is something for the very last days. The 1260 days leading up to the second coming. And so what we got is a revived Roman Empire that comes into being, a 10-nation coalition that will become a persecuting force in the last days. Okay? And so he wants to know about this 10-horn beast. And he says, and of the others that came up, and before whom 3 fell, which even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake great things, that would be referring to the false prophet. And he says, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And so what we got is he's describing an ideal here, because each horn represents a kingdom. That's what it represents, and Revelation explains a little better. We'll probably be looking more of that in part 2. But he says that they reign as kings, so it's kind of like presidents and prime ministers is what we're talking about over particular nations. Well, he says that there's a false prophet that uproots 3 and kind of consumes the power of that whole portion of 3 of those kingdoms. And so what we see is Rome expanding and becoming a dominant influence in this 10-nation coalition, as he uproots 3 of the kingdoms, consumes them for his own purposes. Now this is what he does as he rises in power. This is the great horn that speaks the great things. These are bad things, okay, that he's doing. And he says that this same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Now this is what we see going on today, but not by the 10-horn beast. See, we're getting persecuted now. You know, they don't have to come to your house and beat you up to make you feel persecuted. You know, whenever you're a chaplain in the U.S. military and they write you a citation because you mentioned something from the Bible, I saw that this morning. A chaplain could mention something from the Bible as he canceled some people. See, this is persecution. And so what they're doing is prevailing against the saints. And they're even in some countries, Canada and some other places. In Thailand, you can't say there's salvation in Jesus alone, which is in the Bible. You can't do that. They can arrest you there for saying that. Okay, and now in Canada, I understand it's against the law to read any verses that speak against homosexuality. Say it's against the law to do that. And so what we see is that the spirit of this Antichrist is already on the move, and it's already making war with the saints and trying to control, dominate, and prevail against them. And so used to what was it? I mean, the governments had Christian values, saying what was in the Bible prevailed in the law-making decisions. And so that's why we have a lot of laws that made bad things illegal. It's because they were looking at the Bible when they made those laws. See? And so that's how we got that. And so what we see is that this horn is making war against the saints. He's got this big false world religion. He's trying to propagate. He's trying to get power, trying to get rid of the opposition. So he's prevailing against them using the same techniques they're using today to try to get Christians to be quiet. You know, they try to make them uncomfortable for saying what they believe. And they try to, what it ends up with is a church underground, house churches and all that kind of stuff. That's the way it is in China, where they're discouraged and harassed continually, well, they start having house churches so that they're underground. See, that's the result of that. So this horn's making war with the saints, but look what he says, until the Ancient of Days came. Now that's what we're talking about. This is the 1260 days leading up to the return of Jesus. That's what we're talking about. And so every one of these places we're studying will say that. And I'm just pointing that out. These are the last days before Jesus returns. And so the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that they possessed the kingdom. Now look, we all know that there's a spiritual kingdom that Jesus created on Pentecost. We all know that. Okay? And most of the people where we came from tried to deny there was any other kind of kingdom coming. But when we look at Revelation, way future to when Jesus set up His spiritual kingdom, John looked in the future and through prophecy said what? He said that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord when the seventh trumpet sounded. Okay, so there's something way bigger than what we've experienced on Pentecost coming. Something way bigger. And this is what that's talking about. And that's why he's talking about the saints possessing the kingdom right here when the Ancient of Days came. And so, no, we were wrong when we were telling people, you don't need to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done anymore. We were wrong by saying that. Because what Jesus was getting you prepared to pray for is for this thing that's coming. Say, there's something big coming. Say, and so just like Jesus was telling you to pray for the kingdom to come, He's also praying for His will to be done here on earth as it is in heaven. That's never happened. So see, there's a combination of these two ideals where Satan gets locked in his permanent dwelling for 1,000 years, that pit where he can't deceive nations anymore, and here comes a time where the saints possess the kingdom, and there's no more 10-horn nothing, or no more one-horn false prophet nothing making havoc of God's people. That's all gone. As a matter of fact, Jesus says when He returns that the beast and the false prophet get thrown alive when He comes back into the lake of fire. Okay? Alive they get thrown in there. That's a hands-on job right there. Okay? And so He said, thus He said that the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And so what we see is this fourth beast, it may have started off as just Rome conquering the known world. They ruled the world at one time. But no, we saw that beast, suffered some setbacks. Saying the Roman Empire was divided, and it just became powerless over time. But we see before Jesus returns, a 10-nation coalition comes back together and becomes a very, very powerful driving force in the world. And we see that there's a European Union, that's really talking about their future right now. And I've printed articles on Facebook about it. There's actually articles being written where they're looking for some financial instability in the world. And the Church of Rome is actually offering to provide the entire financial infrastructure for a new European Union, which they estimate will be 10 nations. That's already in print for our day. That's a recent article that I posted this year. So I'm just saying this is where we can see this kind of thing coming into being. So you let some of these other big powers fail, whether it be the United Nations or whatever it is, there's going to be a vacuum for a new superpower. And this 10-nation coalition is tagged to be it. And they're not going to be any kinder to true Christians, than anybody else. And especially with the ideal of the Jesuits. The Jesuits actually teach, and we got a Jesuit Pope now, they actually teach that when the opportunity arises to seize power and to propagate their church, it's just not much different what we're seeing to me over there with Islam right now. It's the same kind of thing. They've got a teaching and a theology that propagates their ideals by force. And so, you hear some of the things that coming from that sector already. That you're Catholic, you're not saved. Catholics only want to go all the way back to Pentecost and all that. They're trying to set themselves up to be the only true thing. And then, we can see some of the things that they do that keeps them from prevailing because of the Word of God. They change times and laws. They do those kind of things. They change things. And then when people look at the Bible and say, no, I choose the Bible over what you're saying, it's a setback for them, But you let them come to power, become a persecuting force, then only the true disciples will stand against it. So there's a fourth beast, and he's going to be diverse from all these other kingdoms. He's going to devour the whole earth and tread it down and break it to pieces. Now, he says, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings. So he's telling us that this is what we're talking about. That's what those horns represent, or the 10 kings, or presidents, or prime ministers, the way John puts it, because they have powers as kings. So that shows there's something a little different. He says, they shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. That'd be the false prophet, I believe is who he's talking about. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. So that's what we're talking about. Speaking great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. So this is what they're doing. You know, this persecution we're receiving today about, you know, like Mayor of Houston demanding all the sermons in Houston. See, that's right, just to wear the saints down. And so they push back really hard. But you let all the governments of the world start to push like that, and you watch the saints get wore down. Just tired of dealing with it, tired of fooling, fighting. And so they go to their little house churches and give up and settle for mouth-to-mouth, house-to-house kind of ministry and evangelizing. But, you know, and some of the other things they're doing, they're trying to co-opt these churches, get them to become corporate and all this, and then they want to control what they can say from the pulpit. And then they're trying to take away their tax breaks and all that kind of stuff now. There's all kind of legislation that's coming forth to be hostile to churches. You watch that push the churches underground, see? It's all part of just wearing out the saints, is what it is. So they wear out the saints of the Most High and think to change times and laws. And so, I mean, whatever God has said, they just change that. And so now you start hearing people talk about, talking differently about various wrongs and evils that the Bible has already spoken against. They start to make allowances and just change those things. You know, become, for whatever reason, they just, I mean, because of political pressure or whatever, they just become politically correct churches or culturally correct churches. Whatever the government's pushing is what they've been to. And so they change times and laws. And so we hear today, you know, that kind of message coming from this new Pope. Just kind of making some changes and making some allowances, getting more hip to whatever whichever way the wind's blowing with the popular opinion, see. Even talking about there's many ways to heaven. See, like the message you can't preach in Thailand? He's saying, hey, he's saying that they always go to God, always go to heaven. I think he even said recently, even atheists can go to heaven. I think he's something that I saw coming from that sector. And so there's just a lot of changes being made, as he talks about the times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until when? A time, times, and dividing a time. There's your 3.5. Okay? That's your 3.5, showing that this is how long he has to wear out the saints. And so what we're going to see is the same thing we're seeing now, but just maybe turned up a few notches. That kind of thing, that kind of wearing out the saints. Okay? But the judgment shall sit. Now see, that's when Jesus comes. The judgment shall sit, and that would be the Lord's army. I'm just showing, they shall take away his dominion to consume it and to destroy it unto the end. And so this is the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So this is where the kingdoms of the world become the kingdoms of our Lord, like John saw. So I looked up this word wear out. It's from the Chaldee. It's used only in a mental sense to afflict, wear out. And I think that's kind of important because we're really seeing this kind of persecution already. And we're talking about turning up the dial. You know, when you start looking up verses like, words like if you got a scanner like I do, you want to know how bad the persecution gets. You know, you put in like kill them, like that. I didn't get any hits. I didn't get that. I'm just letting you know. I'm not saying nobody will die. I'm just saying I didn't get any hits on that. The only place that I saw that the saints are being killed is the church of Smyrna, which is probably because of their geographical location. Probably what we're seeing going over there in Iraq and Afghanistan, over there in that area, Syria, say where the Christians are being murdered, Egypt. Say Smyrna was probably the location of where those saints are. We know they're all end-time churches because Jesus said he's coming to every one of them. As you look through those, he's coming. It just keeps reoccurring. So he's showing the way it is. Well, every church didn't have that kind of suffering. And so they are going to suffer this pressure, this wearing out of the saints. We know that for sure, that's coming. Now, so that the point that we want to make here, this is the 3.5 year of the false prophet, what he calls a time, times, and dividing a time. All right? Now, this is a time of trouble. In Daniel 12, if we drop down to chapter 12, he talks about this time again. And he says, "At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of the people." So Michael is a commander of one of some of God's army there. He stands up, the great prince of the standeth for the children of the people, and there shall be a time of trouble. That's 3.5 years we've been studying, such as never since there was a nation, even to that same time. Now, we can already see a lot of trouble. We can expect a lot worse, I think. And so he said it's going to be kind of trouble like the world has never seen. But at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that is found written in the book. There's your second coming. Say, everyone that's found written in the book of the Lamb, Jesus' Lamb's book of life, they all get delivered. And so he's coming to do that. Now, what he's doing here is something that I've been sharing with y'all every time we study prophecy, to hide this. Because, see, he's going to tell Daniel, we're going to seal the book till the time of the end. He's purposely hiding it from people until it's the end time, and then he starts to reveal it through his Spirit, starts to make us understand how he hid it, and that's what he did with what he told Daniel. And so he talks about the second and the final coming together, I think, is what he's doing here, to hide it. Because, see, everybody knows that in after the 1,000 years, when he comes for the last trump, there's going to be a great resurrection. And that's what it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He talks about a last trump and a great resurrection where all the dead are raised and the small and great stand before God. And so a lot of people try to stick that up in the beginning of the 1,000 years. It's not going to happen that way. Okay, we got a millennial time where the kingdoms of the world become the kingdoms of our Lord. That's got to happen. So he's talking about the second and final coming together here, one before the 1,000 years, one at the end of the 1,000. And that's one of the ways that he hid it. And he says that in many of them shall sleep, and the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt. So we look at that as the third or final coming. But then he talks about this kingdom time in verse 3. And he says, "And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever." Now, what's important about that is that's the same language almost that he used in the parable of tares. When he said he sends forth his angels and they remove all the wicked and leave the righteous, he says that the righteous shall shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of the Father. So that's the same thing he's saying. The wise will be like this, the brightness of the firmament, see, as the righteousness of the stars, or as the righteous, as they turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So he's just talking about their light shining. But he says in verse 4, "Shut up the words and seal the book." So people couldn't figure this out until it was time. And then he let us see it. So he says, "Shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end." And in that time, he says that many will run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased in the land. And I think that our understanding of God is what's being increased. And I think in these last days, a lot of this information is coming from people that are actually going to and fro from here to heaven. There's been a lot of people experiencing near-death experiences, coming back with information, sharing some things, testimonies that help us to see more clearly about the direction the church is supposed to be going. But it's not only that. It's something Alex was talking about before we come to church. It's almost just like the migration of the birds. I mean, when it's time, they just all start, going the direction they're supposed to go. Now, not every bird in the world, but the birds that are supposed to go migrate. And that's the way it is at this end time. You got people from every kind of little church migrating the same direction. A lot of them are leaders, a lot of them are teachers, and they're starting to share this information. And we're all saying the same kind of things. When I look on YouTube, man, I'm finding so many people are teaching what I'm teaching today, it's not even funny. And I don't mean the ideals about there not being a rapture. I don't believe there's going to be a rapture. And some of the things we'll be looking at will be so against that in this study and the next study. And just what we've been looking at so far about him wearing out the saints. How can he wear out the saints if they're not here? For Pete's sake, I mean, let's get a brain on, okay? Let's get a brain on and just really sort this out. He's wearing out the saints, and we're going to win, say. And so the only scenario that fits that is what he said in the parable of tares. He returns with his army and removes the wicked, and we stay here to shine bright. Okay? And that's what we're talking about. And so as we look at this, he says, "Shut up the words even to this time of the end," when people are running to and fro or going to and fro, and knowledge is being increased. Now, if we go to verse 5, he says, I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood another two, talking about angels, the one on this side of the bank of the river and the other on the other side of the bank of the river. And he says, one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long? Now, it's important to know that John had the same vision Daniel did. The very same vision. They both saw this man. They were both looking forward. And they actually, I think, I misspoke just a minute ago. When he saw someone on this side of the river and someone on the other side of the river, I think Daniel was on one side and John was on the other. And they were seeing the same vision. And as we look at this, he says, Daniel looked, and behold, there stood two, one on this side of the bank and one on the other side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was on the waters. So there's someone on the waters that's got something to say. But there's someone on each side of the river, say. And like I said, John had this vision too. So that's what makes me think that Daniel and John is on either side, and it's an angel on the river, or on the waters, okay? And so it says that, and he says, how long? He says, one asked the question to the angel on the river, clothed in linen. He says, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? He wants to know how long till it's over, okay? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was on the waters of the river. He held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, that it be for a time, times and a half. There's your 3.5. He's saying, how long this vision of the 10-horned beast? How long does he wear out the saints? He says 3.5 years. That's how long he does it. All right? And he's just letting us know that this is what's coming. And this is what he does, y'all. He says, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So what you need to know, that he's prevailing against the saints, what is he doing? He's actually causing the saints to have their power scattered. And so just like we've had a lot of Christians in government promoting Christian ideals, Christian theology, he's scattering their power. And we already see that being tore down right now in government. As all this legislation is just coming out against Christianity, against even the ability to share that. I mean, we got preachers being arrested for preaching on street corners. Or in some places, there's been an arrest where someone didn't have a permit to have a church in his own home. And then we've had another arrest where an old man was feeding the homeless. They arrested him every day. Every time he got to jail, he cooked another meal and started serving soup. And finally, some judge said, stop arresting that man. Yeah, just saw that this week. Stop arresting that man. He wasn't going to quit. To his dying day, he's going to feed the hungry. And so, yeah, there's a battle going on. But you see that they're trying to scatter the power of the holy people now. Well, wait till there is a persecuting force like this 10-horned beast. You know, the spirit of Antichrist is already doing what he's going to do. I mean, the spirit of the Antichrist is moving wherever it can move. In whatever government and whatever kings that he can move in, whatever prime ministers, whatever presidents he can move in. He's moving to do the same thing that's only going to be done on steroids by this false prophet and these 10-horned beasts. And so if I was to take something from a modern version on Daniel 12 verse 7, this is the way it would read. I heard the man dressed in linen clothes. He said it will be for a time, times and a half a time, when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Okay? Then all these things will be finished. And so that's what it's about. It's about shattering the power, scattering the people, shattering the power. It's not about necessarily everyone getting killed. Now again, in the region of where this takes place, the 10-horned beast, that would be like a church of Smyrna probably. There probably will be a whole lot of people right there that lose their lives. But you know what? I'm just being honest. In Texas, are you kidding me? You know, I mean, just like over there when we had the Bible study over there with Lizzie and Alexis last week, I asked, how many believe that Jesus has come back? Everybody in that room raised their hand there for a Bible study. I mean, I don't remember seeing anybody didn't raise their hand. And so, you know, I'm just saying, people know. People know. And you put it to test, you know. I mean, you say something great about Jesus in the grocery store, see if someone don't say amen. You know, I'm just saying, this is Texas. You know, so, I mean, don't expect the persecution level to be much more than a great big annoyance and great big, what you'd call just pressure to not do what you're supposed to do, whether it be to feed a hungry person or to them trying to take all the money from the church, taxing it some kind of way or something, And so we can see that the Bible does forecast, and we'll be studying this today. It does forecast the church to go underground. So finally, the wise will recognize the times when they come. This is what he said in verse 8 of Daniel 12, what we're studying. I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. He's saying, I sealed this up. I'm going to keep it hidden until it's time for people to understand it. He says, many shall be purified, made white, and tried. Now, that's going to happen. We got people being tried right now. Look how many people has forsaken the Lord that we know. Man, I can remember years ago when some of the elements of this church got together, man, there was not a closer family, there was not a stronger family than our church family. There was not more love that I ever seen than our church family. And even in that circle, look what the devil has taken from us. Even in that, what I saw was a perfect circle. Look what he's taken from us. And so we're what survive of a 30-year ministry here, where I have ministered. This is the survivors, This is it. And so he's saying that many are going to be purified and made white and tried. So some people are doing that. Create me a clean heart. That's their prayer. Some people are hearing that call, be ye holy for I'm holy. Some people are wanting to know, they're asking God, teach me to have a pure love, right? Teach me, create in me this clean heart, give me a right spirit, the kind of things that we're taught to pray for. But then there's a trial going on there too, and some of it's more than they can bear. So you have people leaving their wives for another woman, doing this, doing that, and you just thought you'd never see that with those people. See? And so he said that, but the wicked will do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. The wicked are not going to see this time coming. I can tell you right now from that question I asked over there in the low-income housing area last Tuesday, when I asked everybody who believes Jesus is come back, I was sent there. See, because they all believed it. See? But he's saying there's a wicked here. None of the wicked are going to see the times that they're in. He said, but the wise, they're going to understand. They're going to know. There's going to be an element of wise people going to know these are the last days, and that they need to come and get their life straightened out with the Lord. They're going to know that. The wise will understand, but the wicked, they're just going to go blindly doing wickedly. Now, John's vision and its meaning. The woman dressed in light. Revelation chapter 12, to me, this is like one of the best things that we can study to show us what's going on with the church as we look at chapter 12 in Revelation. It says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Do you remember how we just read a moment ago? We're going to use that how he said that whenever Jesus comes back, that all those that were shining as lights, they're going to be like the stars forever and ever. Well, see, that's what Christian light is. Christian light is starlight. But the apostles, when you got 12 stars, then that's the 12 apostles and their influence upon the church, as they wrote the scriptures say. So that's the 12 apostles, what that is. So you got a woman clothed in God's light here. That's the church is what it is. And so what's different, usually, as we look at this, God is always said to be the sunlight. And we're going to show you a couple of scriptures that show that. As he talks about Jesus, his face shone like the sun. But the church is usually talked about as being moonlight because it actually reflects God's light to the world. See, we don't have our own light necessarily, but we're clothed in God's light. And so here's a woman that's clothed in light, is what she's clothed in. Okay? So this is the church, the 3.5 years before the second coming, is what it is. The church is clothed in the light of God, crowned with the light of the 12 apostles, and that's what we're seeing. The moon's under her feet to show that the reflection of the church is the reflection of God's light into the world. Okay? Now, we're just going to look at some things that are just to define what the meaning of these symbols, sun, moon, and stars are. When we look in Revelations 1, verse 16, it talks about Jesus there, how that his face was like the sun when it shines in its brightness. So see, that's the kind of sunlight we're talking about. The church is dressed in, God's light. Okay? And he says the hidden meaning of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands. See, that's candlestick light and starlight. The 7 stars are the messengers of the 7 churches. So a messenger can either be a person or an angel. This is something that's used. The apostles actually wrote one time that we're the messengers of the church. It's the same Greek word as used here. So starlight, candlelight, is what we're talking about. Those are preacher or minister, apostle, apostolic light is what we're talking about. So in Genesis 37, to show you how that can work, whenever Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, he said, I had another dream. I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing to me. And so they were all prophets. They all got angry. They all wanted to do him harm because of what he said. And because they're hearing him say that they knew what it meant. In verse 10 it says, when he told his father and his brothers, his father criticized them by asking, what's this dream you had? Will your mother and I, see, the mother is the moonlight, the father is the sunlight, and all your brothers was the starlight, where they come and bow down before you. And it's important to know that, because the sunlight represents God's light. He's the Father. Well, it just so happens that in the New Testament that the church is called the mother. And the book of Hebrews talks about New Jerusalem being the mother of us all, and it's the church of the firstborn. And so that's what we're talking about. Sunlight, church light, and that's what this woman's clothed in, is all this light. See, that we're studying. They're just symbols to show that this woman, there's the church, and it's clothed in God's light. Now what Jesus said, Jesus forecasted the light of God dimming and losing influence as a sign of His coming. Now what did Daniel say? He's going to wear out the saints and scatter their power. So that's what's going on here as He's forecasting the sun, moon, and stars to not give their light. We're just seeing God's light is dimming in the world, and His influence is dimming with governments. Doesn't mean the church will not have a great big harvest, because it is going to. That God's going to meet this darkness, this gross darkness, with pouring out His Spirit. And I'm telling you now, there will be a harvest. But don't expect the governments to be the first in line to the baptistry. Okay, they're going to be where Satan's able to work his magic is in the governments. And so he's going to work it to persecute. And so Jesus put it this way: immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. So what happens is all of God's light is dimming right before the Son of Man returns. He says He appears in the heavens as a sign of His coming, say. And it says all the tribes of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now listen, this is what He's going to do the day He comes. He's not going to make any bones about it. He's going to tell us what He's going to do. He's going to send His angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together His elect from the four winds of heaven, from one end of the heaven to the other. And so the parable of the tares actually is telling us that the wicked are being removed by the angels. But this verse is actually talking about how that God's elect is gathered together. Now I believe they're gathered together for the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's what I believe they're getting gathered for. Okay? But and I think there's plenty of evidence for that. It's just not part of this study. We can just see the trumpet sounds, the Son of Man is sent forth, and the angels with a great sound of trumpet are sent forth to do their job. So what we're just pointing out is that God's influence is waning in the world. Governments purge Jesus. For Psalms chapter 2 says they're going to do that. They're going to purge Jesus. They want to cast off His influence, cast His bands off. And so they're purging Jesus. They're doing that right now. And that is a sign of itself that the coming is getting close. Just letting you know. The 10-horned beast is a bigger sign. But I just want you to know that this dimming is a sign of this coming, that we're getting close. Now, let's go back to Revelation chapter 12 and pick up verse 2 where we left off. We want to get into this ideal of birth pains and tribulation that usher in the return of Christ. Now, this is some cool stuff right here. I really want you to watch how this works out. Because, again, to hide this, He talks about the first and second coming together. And when the Lord showed that to me, I just knew this is what He's doing every time He talks about the first and second coming together. And He does that here too, to keep it hidden until the time of the end. And then we just see we see all about it. We see what's going on. Okay? So it says this woman that's dressed in all these lights, she being with child, cried, travailed in birth, and pain to be delivered. Now this is important because we know that the Bible talks about there are birth pains of the church and of Israel that brings in the second coming. And they cause the persecution, the tribulation period, birth pains. But there was an Old Testament church that brought Jesus in the first time, just like there's a New Testament church that brings His return when it starts to have birth pains. And so what he says here is this woman's is with child, travailing in birth to be delivered. And we just want to cover the ideal of these birth pains right now. We'll come back and show the first and second coming together in a minute. So he says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron. That's what it says in every verse that talks about Jesus coming with His whole army, that when He comes with His army, He's going to smite the earth with the sword of His mouth, kill the wicked, and He's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron. That's right out of Revelation chapter 19. That's right out of Revelation chapter 2 and talking to Thyatira. He's saying He's going to do this. Okay? Now, what we see is that she brought forth this man-child who was to rule the nation with a rod of iron, but this was His first coming when the Old Testament church brought Him into being as a swaddling child when He's born in Bethlehem. And it says her child was caught up to God and to His throne. Now that happened at His crucifixion. Okay? But there's some language being hidden here because as we look at this, we'll see that he talks about Herod trying to kill all the firstborn. He talks about that in here. When Jesus was born, Satan moved on him to try to have him killed. And Herod had all the firstborn in Bethlehem slaughtered from 1 year old and upward, I believe. Or 1 year old and downward. And so what we're seeing here, though, just want to point out that this man-child was the one to rule the nation with a rod of iron. That's Jesus. And this is the image of tribulation period between birth pains that usher in the return of Christ. Now, when we look at a verse that actually talks about that, it'd be Isaiah 66, where he says, a voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice of the Lord that rendereth recompense to His enemies. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Now, there's some things that we need to see about this, is that Jesus was born the first time in a peaceful time of the church. But birth pains begin before His return. And so what he's saying is that Jesus came forth. In other words, Jesus came forth to be born into the world in a time of peace. So before she travailed, she brought forth. See? And so Jesus was born, and then the persecution came afterward. And then, of course, we see that there's persecution right before His second coming, and that's what we're going to be lining out as we study this. So before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. So see, Jesus is called the man-child. You see that? So we're talking about Jesus coming forth to rule the nation with a rod of iron. He was born to do that in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. When the ruling with the rod of iron, that refers to His second coming when the Lord comes to render recompense to His enemies. That's what every place that talks about His return says, that He's coming in flaming fire to take vengeance on all His enemies. That's what He's coming back to do. He has a specific purpose for His second coming, and it's to deal with His enemies. That's what it's for. Okay? And so this rod of iron that's ruling with, rod is a symbol of correction. Just like you might take a rod to your child to discipline or whatever. Well, we're talking about this rod being, to come to rule with the rod of iron. A rod of iron would mean strict rule. Saying strict correction, strict rule. Because He is here to bring this into being as king. And so this is what he's saying. The rod of iron refers to Him coming to render recompense to His enemies, the man-child. As it was brought forth, and then the pain came afterward. So Jesus is born in a peaceful time for the church, but the birth pains begin before His return. Now, let's go to Jeremiah 30 that talks about the birth pains right before His second coming. Okay, birth pain is tribulation. Much of the tension is on Israel when these birth pains happen, because Jeremiah is speaking to Israel. And so it says, "For thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear and not of peace." So that's what's going on with Israel. The whole world's against them. And like the last time they had a vote, they had one supporter like Canada, that was on their side. Can you imagine all the countries in the world being against you except Canada? That's got a weak army. That's the situation they're in. See? And so it says, we heard this voice of trembling and of fear, not of peace. Ask ye now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned to paleness. So he's giving this picture of all the men, the soldiers, or whatever in Israel, with their hands on their loins like they're travailing in birth. That's the tribulation, persecution that they're going through. So their faces all turn pale. He says, alas, for the day is great, and there's none like it. That's what we had heard Daniel say in chapter 12. It's a time of trouble that there's never been. And so that's what he's saying, that this is, at last, the day is great, and there's none like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, and he shall be saved out of it. So things are looking really bad. They're looking really grim. And guess what? Jesus comes in their most desperate hour and delivers Israel from their enemies. So it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. And they shall serve the Lord their God, and David their king. That would be Jesus, because he's the son of David. Said, David their king, whom I will raise up to them. And so he's forecasting a better time. You're not going to be under all this persecution and have all these yokes upon you. He says that nobody else is going to serve themselves of you anymore. But I'm going to put you in a good place, and Jesus will reign over them. Okay? Now, the birth pain is tribulation that brings the return of Christ. Let's look at it from Isaiah 26. And so it says in verse 17, like as a woman with child that draweth near the time of her delivery is in pain, and crieth out in her pangs, so have we been in thy sight, O Lord. We have been with child and have been in pain. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. We have not wrought any deliverance in the earth, neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. The dead man shall live together. Now listen, he's queuing us up, see, as to this third coming. Right here, and he says, the dead man shall live, with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust. For thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out its dead. So it's talking about a resurrection there, to cue in that this birth pains is about the end of the age. Okay? Come, my people, and enter into thy chambers, and shut thy doors. I'm letting you know right now, we're here. When Jesus comes back, we're here. We're not raptured out anywhere. He's telling us what we're going to do. And these are the two verses I actually showed Patrick, because he had this dream where Jesus told him to go into his chambers until it was over. That they were saved, they would be here, but the wicked were going away. And so I said, that's right out of Isaiah 26. And I showed this to him. And so he says, come, my people, and enter into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until what? The indignation be overpassed. He's saying the dirty works begins right here, where all my vengeance is taken out on my enemies. He said, you just go in there and be at rest until this is over. Say, till all my indignation be overpassed. All the vengeance that belonged to Jesus, been telling us all these years when we read the Bible. Vengeance belongs to me. It's mine. Don't you be out taking vengeance. It's mine. This is the day that what is his gets exercised. It belongs to him. It is a righteous thing for God to take vengeance, for Jesus to take vengeance on those that have persecuted His church. It is a righteous thing, not a bad thing. It is a righteous thing. And He tells us so in His Word. And so this is what He says in verse 21. This is what He's going to do. For behold, the Lord cometh out of His place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. Anybody that killed somebody and got away with it, it's coming up right here. It's not going to be a secret anymore. Everyone's going to pay up. The wicked are going to pay up. We are all here when it happens, and He's coming to destroy the wicked. All right? The rise of the 10-horned beast. We're going to go back to Revelation 12, and we're going to pick up in verse 3. And so, because we looked at 2 and 5 a moment ago, now I want to get this other picture of the first and second coming. And this is what he says. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There's our 10-horned beast. That's how we know it's the last days. And 7 crowns upon his heads. And he says, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven. And those are the fallen angels. And that's where people get that from, how Satan led a third of the angels in heaven to rebel. This is what it's talking about. The stars can represent angels. We went over that, just like it can represent messengers, whether they be angels or apostles or preachers. And so he says that this dragon, which is the devil, he says he drew a third part of these stars of heaven, and he cast them to the earth, And the dragon, this is not the ten-horned beast now. The ten-horned beast has been mentioned already, but it's the dragon that stood before the woman. That's the Old Testament church, which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now, that was when Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And then he told the wise men, hey, when you find the child, just come tell me where he's at so I can come worship him. But the Lord said, he's not coming to worship. You need to go to Egypt to go hide. And as soon as the wise man left out another way, and Herod heard that he had been had, well, he sent his troops in there and killed all of the male children in Bethlehem, all of them, from 1 year old and down, to make sure he got him. Jesus wasn't there. And so the red dragon was behind that, the government there that was doing that, trying to kill the baby Jesus. And so we're showing that he's talking about the first coming and the second coming together again. Because the ten-horned beast is the end time. But this dragon, whenever he tried to kill Jesus the first time, that was when Jesus came in the first time. And so he says that so he was ready to devour this child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, and that's how we know it's Jesus, who's to rule the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And so Jesus stayed here, escaped Herod's attempt to kill him, or the red dragon's attempt to kill him, and he stayed here until he fulfilled his purpose, to where he was crucified, and then he was caught up to the right hand of God. And so we can see that this man-child, we're going to show that to you, that's Jesus. So this is the first and second coming taught together to help hide the prophecy till its time. And it says that Daniel already had the 10-born beast. We've already seen he belongs in the last 3.5 years before the coming. And the 10-nation coalition arising to persecute will be a sign of that coming. Now, let's look at this, some of these symbols again. We're not going anywhere, but Jesus is coming here. That's what I've been trying to teach the people here. And so in Revelation chapter 2, verse 25 through 28, this is a message to the last days church right here. And he says that, but that which ye have heard already, hold fast till I come. Now this is what he's saying to Thyatira, that I'm fixing to come. Say, and we said that he said that to all the churches, that I'm coming. And he says, he that overcometh and keepeth my works to the end, to him will I give power over the nations. That's what Daniel was talking about. You're going to possess the kingdom. You're going to have power over the nations. They're going to scatter your power in the last 3.5 years, but when it's over, I'm giving you the power over the nations. Okay? And this is Jesus. He said he's coming to rule the nations with a rod of iron. You see that? He shall rule them with a rod of iron, talking about the nations. As a vessel of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, as I've received of my Father, and I will give him the morning star. Jesus said that I, Jesus, am the morning star. He's saying in two ways, I'm coming. I'm coming. When you see the 10-horned beast, know it's near. When he starts persecuting, know it's near. I'm coming. And he wants you to know I'm coming to rule with a rod of iron. Okay? So that's Jesus, the man-child. All right? In Revelation chapter 19, guess what? He puts all this in a nice, neat little Armageddon package. Now watch how he delivers this to us in verse 11. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he does judge and make war. That's Jesus, coming with all of his holy angels to make war. And the armies that followed him on white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And he says, out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. So we can see that by the word of his power, he smites the nations. And then what does he do? He rules them with a rod of iron. This ruling with a rod of iron is what happens after he deals with the wicked. He's coming to rule with the rod of iron. And so he talks about what he's going to do to the wicked right here. He treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of the Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh name written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And here in Revelation 19, he starts to talk about who? See, the 10-horned beast. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, which he had deceived them, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. And these both were cast alive into a lake of fire with burning and brimstone. The false prophet and the beast was cast alive into the lake of fire. And the remnant were slain with a sword. All the wicked, that even the ones that weren't part of that 10-horned beast, they're slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse. which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. He's literally saying that all the wicked are going to be buzzard food, and Jesus is going to do it. He's literally saying it. Okay? It's a literally hands-on job of Jesus and His angels. Now this is the way he puts it in 2 Thessalonians verse 1. And we're nearly done, y'all. I know it's been a long study, but we're nearly done. What he says in 2 Thessalonians 1, seeing it is a righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you. Is this day right here, everything's going to happen to the wicked? It's a righteous thing. All the people that persecuted the church, that's what he's talking about. It's a righteous thing with God to recompense. That means to repay, to take vengeance upon those that troubled the church. To recompense tribulation of them that troubled you, those that persecuted the church. And to you who are troubled, guess what? A time of rest is coming right in. Say, you who are troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with His mighty angels. He's coming with His whole army in flaming fire to do what? To take vengeance on all those that don't know God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. He's coming to deal with it. And we're here to be troubled until that day. There's a payday coming. This is all how it ends, y'all. All right? Now look, if we go back to Revelation 12, we're going to show that the church is going underground. Probably will be a lot of house churches in this time. And it says in Revelation 12, and the woman fled into the wilderness where she what? Had a place prepared of God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. There's your 3.5 years or your 42 months. So what he's saying is that when this 10-horned beast appears to persecute, what happens to the church? It goes into the wilderness. That's just like if someone was chasing you and you ran and hid in the woods. That's what that's like. The whole church is going in the woods. Okay? And we just mean underground. And that's what we're talking about, a lot of house churches. And so he's saying, what's going to happen to the church there? You know, SWAT going to be kicking down the door trying to find you? No. There's a place prepared of God that God's going to feed the church there in the wilderness for this 1,260 days. 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought, and the dragon and his angels fought. That'd be the devil and his angels, and they prevailed not. The devil didn't win. Neither was a place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent, called the devil and Satan. So that's how we know who he is. The dragon is the devil. He deceives the whole world. He's cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. But look what happens. The Lord is saying, I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of His Christ. For the accuser of our brethren are cast down, which accuse them before God day and night. He's saying with the persecution of the devil, when he's cast down to the earth, comes the power of God. This is something we've been studying. We've been studying how the power of God is going to step up when the devil starts to persecute. And that's what we can expect. We can expect the power of God to increase, to manifest itself as we preach the gospel under persecution. So the apostate church, though, or the world religion, will rise in political power, and the true church rises in spiritual power and evangelism. Okay? Now, if we continue, I just want to come across with this message, that God has everything under control in this 3.5 years. You need to know that. You don't need to be worried about politics and how bad it's going, the world and how bad it's going. God has everything under control, and all these false prophets, all these governments, all these prime ministers and presidents, they're not doing anything but what God has put them in office to do to bring about the conditions for the last days. You need to quit worrying about it. Okay? So he says in verse 10, I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of His Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. So there's some bold preachers in there. Some of them will get killed. Some of them will be. It says that therefore, rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Why? He says, because the devil's come down to you having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. So that's what makes this 3.5 years kind of bad. He knows he got a short time, and his day's coming. And when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, what did he do? He persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. He's persecuting the church. Okay? And to the woman were given what, y'all? 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly in the wilderness unto her place, where she is nourished for a time and a times and a half a time. Now you see how he switched that? He went from 1260 days to the 3.5, showing it's the same time period. And what's happening to the woman that's in the wilderness? Is she getting chased by a bunch of rabid wolves? No, she's getting what? Nourished. She's getting nourished there. Hey, we can hope in our God. We can know that He's got plans for the bride. It ain't to be hunted like dogs. The false prophet is going to be scattering the power. That's all true. But we see that happening already in the governments. Scattering the power of the holy people. It doesn't change the fact they're going to be true people that's going to get nourished for this 3.5 years, and they're even going to be nourished from the face of the serpent. He's not going to be able to get after them. As a matter of fact, he's so angry that he can't get at them, he tries to do something else. The serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now listen, I've got an opinion about this, but I've also heard someone else that claimed they had a vision. Same as my opinion. And what he said was that this was a flood of wickedness and filth, mainly propagated through television and all this movies, all this stuff, all this anti-Christian stuff coming up, even putting this stuff in cartoons, making fun of Jesus, got shows to make fun of Jesus. You know, it's terrible stuff. It's blasphemy. So he's trying to flood the church with this wickedness to carry away some of his people. See? But look what happens. The earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed the flood that the dragon cast out of his mouth. So something's going to happen to keep them from propagating this filth. You know, we could see a really crash of all kinds of electrical systems and all that kind of stuff. The earth's going to help the woman. See? And so even there, God has got help to try to preserve His holy people. All right? And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. And this is how we know who the woman is, y'all. The woman and her seed. In other words, this would be the converts, the people we baptize. They are those that keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. He tells us who the woman is. It's just the church. It's just us, y'all. That's all it is. And so the identity of the woman and her seed is the church and the converts. Because of God's protection in this time, Satan tries to flood the church with filth and corruption, but God will destroy the means whereby the devil propagates this filth. Now, I think this is probably the last slide, y'all. I want y'all to see that we win in the end. We just need to be faithful to our Jesus and to the end, because we win in the end. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, right out of Revelation 17, verse 12 through 14, which have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So these would be prime ministers and presidents, because he says they receive power as kings, so they're not really just kings. And that's kind of the way that European Union functions, with prime ministers and presidents, that kind of thing, say. They don't have a lot of kings over there. And so he says, these have one mind. They're all in agreement, and they give their power and strength to the beast. So that whatever's coming up, this world religion that they're propagating, they're going to give all their power to support that for a while. And these shall make war with the Lamb, just the true people of God. All the persecution is going to come from the Lamb. And the Lamb shall overcome them, because He's Lord of lords, King of kings. And they that are with the Lamb, they're called, chosen, and faithful. That's us. All right? That's all I'm going to share with you on part 1. I have enough for a part 2.